My own brother is a Kevin by Dovahkiin 14. He has done so many absurdly stupid things and never learns, but the list is so long I don't even bother keeping track of anything, so I just have one story that happened something like 9 hours ago. I'm in a play at school and am the main character. My brother Kevin is working the lights for this play. Our first play performance was today, and it went well. We have lights set up just in front of the stage to give it extra lighting because the catwalk lights aren't enough. When the play is done, my brother is talking to another person in the play. He complains about how hot the lights get, and then he suggests that we should pour water on the lights so they don't get hot. Water on electricity.
Kevin has a cold by JBH007. Kevin has a cold. Not super bad as he's still at work, but is clearly congested. He was sitting in the break room with a few other coworkers when he was taking some Fiern spray. Fiern is a decongestant that works by spraying it up the nose, and it comes in a little squeeze bottle. Well, apparently the bottle was getting low, so Kevin decided to simply turn it upside down and spray it in his nose that way. Cue 5 minutes of coughing and gagging from getting a nose full of liquid while his coworkers laugh. It's been about half an hour, and thankfully my tea has washed away the taste in my mouth, but man, that was stupid.
Kevin takes on a bus by Kielm. I have a great story about a Kevin I know, that I thought I'd share. Kevin is a nice enough guy, friendly and outgoing, but tends to go through phases of absent-mindedness. One normal sunny day, much like any other, Kevin was taking on the daily task of walking from A to B, as he regularly does, in the small town he lives in. Kevin came to a pedestrian crossing, pressed the button and waited for the sign to change so he could cross. Having a lot on his mind, Kevin became a little distracted and failed to notice that the green man had appeared and shook himself awake before starting to walk across the road. Traffic was light on this corner anyway, so he wasn't holding anyone up. Unfortunately, as he was making his way across the road, the green man disappeared, now replaced by a red man. Kevin wasn't one to disobey the rules, and obligingly stopped crossing the road, coming to a complete stop in the middle of it. Unfortunately for Kevin, this particular brain fart lasted a little too long, as the local bus service had been approaching the corner and the bus driver was having a hard time understanding why Kevin had stopped crossing. Neither party had time to react, and the bus subsequently collided with Kevin. Fortunately for Kevin, it wasn't the first hard knock he'd had, and generally having a relaxed demeanor meant he'd taken the hit rather well, or he was just really fortunate, who knows. To top it off, Kevin was rushed to the local hospital, where he was wheeled in and stopped at the nurse's station. The emergency department was full of noise and hustle, more than you'd expect for a quiet afternoon. Kevin waited patiently for a while before asking the nurse what was going on. "We have a priority emergency coming in, don't worry, we'll be with you shortly." "Oh no, what happened?" "Someone was hit by a bus." "Oh. Yeah. That was me." The nurse looked him up and down and raised her eyebrows. "You?" "Yeah, I was hit by a bus." Kevin was fine, no life-threatening injuries, just a few broken bones. He made a complete recovery smile.
Kevina doesn't get it. By Allalovesmemes. She said she doesn't need children for her genes to be kept on this world after her death. She said she would have her grandchildren for that.
Kevin was my lab partner in chemistry today. By Ninja7. So today in Chem H we were doing a lab differentiating between what is a mixture and what is a compound. My teacher had these glass bottles with caps all over the place and we could do anything except touch the components. That includes wafting the odor of the components. These bottles were multiple years old, and one of them was yellow curdled milk. Naturally, when we got to that station, Kevin opens the bottle and just takes a big deep breath of it. That smell got all over the room. I was next to it. Kevin threw up right after that. I'm getting a new lab partner.
My fiancé Kevin by vishnuspriestess. I saw Kevin from across a field at a permaculture retreat I was on years ago. It was love at first sight. Kevin was traveling and studying on different farms, living out of his tent. I fell for Kevin fast and agreed to be part of his travels in the coming summer. Kevin had no car, so we took my diesel VW across the country. One afternoon we had to stop to fill up the car. After specifically guiding us to the pump that offered diesel, Kevin proceeded to fill up my car with gas while I ran into the convenience store. I didn't realize this and started driving the car. $1,000 in repairs to my car and we're back on the road. Kevin's in the passenger seat. I drive past a state trooper on the highway and get pulled over for speeding. The cop asks for my ID, registration and insurance. Kevin opens the glove box where there is a stack of papers. He finds my registration, keeps shuffling around and can't find my proof of insurance. The cop grows increasingly impatient and writes us a ticket, says we have to come to the courthouse with our insurance card. At the next rest stop I'm flipping through all the papers in my glove box, when I see my insurance card. It was there the whole time. Years go by and despite the fact that Kevin is a total Kevin, I'm still deeply in love with him. I go up to visit him. He's rented this tiny house in a tiny house community. It's super cute, cedar walls, little kitchen, tiny heater built into the wall. After a raining day where Kevin worked outside all day, I make Kevin and I some soup and we fall asleep. I wake up coughing in the middle of the night. The kitchen wall is on fire. I wake up Kevin, we run outside. I'm in just my panties knocking on his neighbor's doors to see who has a fire extinguisher. We get the fire out and the kitchen wall is pretty scorched but the house is intact. The fire had come from the heater. Kevin had hung his flannel over the heater so it would dry out. It's Thanksgiving and I'm cooking with my brother and now fiancé Kevin. I'm exhausted and sitting on the couch out of view from the kitchen. My brother is out grabbing groceries. I ask Kevin to add bay leaves to the turkey brine. He says he's never heard of anyone doing that, but he obliges. When my brother and I go to dump the brine then cook the turkey. The brine is a super funny color. I say, hey babe, what did you put in this? Bailey's. Kevin replies. Turkey turned out alright regardless, but we tell that story over Thanksgiving.
The Great Kevin Weed Saga by Act 1308. I knew a Kevin once upon a time. He had a few odd habits, but the following tale is about the top of them all. He rode a motorcycle, and thought it made him look badass. It didn't. But it cost him bugger all for fuel, so there was that. He also liked his marijuana. In Australia, there's a town called Nimbin, which has occasional drug festivals. These are discreetly advertised, and people converge, and buy their soft drug of choice, be it wacky backy or magic mushroom or whatever. A bit of indulgence is had by all, then they go their separate ways. The police are aware of the whole thing, but it's generally harmless, so they don't put too much effort into stopping it. Though they will usually patrol the highway and pull people over at random after the fact. So our Kevin decides to go to the festival, and buys himself a hefty baggie to take home, but he's worried about being pulled over unchecked by the cops, so he hides the weed in the gas tank. It gets better. He makes it all the way home without being pulled over, oh, the irony, and then tried to hook the bag out of the tank. Funny thing about plastic and petrol. The bag kind of fell apart, leaving the weed behind in the tank. It gets better. So he decides to ride around and around the block, until the bike runs out of gas. Then he cuts the tank open and scrapes out all the petrol-soaked weed, which he promptly spreads out on a tarp to dry on the front lawn. And then, welds the fuel tank back together. How he never had a fume explosion, I'll never know. And once that weed was dry, he smoked it. And bitched about the taste. But he still smoked every single bit.
My Best Friend Kevin. By I Crave Death Law 69. So my best friend is a total Kevin. He has gone to be tested for any mental disorders and he was considered perfectly fine. Here is a compilation as to what he has done. Kevin and I were members of a math club back in high school. He would forget what his position was. He was the social media person. He even thought he was the president at one point. He believes the Earth is a cube. Not round, not flat, but a cube. Apparently he saw it on a YouTube video. He goes off in a game and completely forgets that we were playing to begin with. The longest time that he forgot was 2 hours. Kevin can't make the microwave work. His microwave has the instructions next to it at all times. He called his mama virgin, because apparently she has never had sex when he's been alive. He'll forget the wrapping of the burger and eat the paper it's wrapped in. He has lost his phone twice. It had only been 2 days. He texted me to call his phone because he couldn't find it. He tried to do flip because he thought it was easy. He face planted on the asphalt. These are just some of the things he's done in the past 3 years.
My Kevin of a further by potatovisage. I have lived with Kevin for almost 20 years now. He's not much displayed his Kevinness during this time, however, his stories from his younger days are enough proof he is a true Kevin. I have always considered him a bit abnormal, considering what he does and has been doing these years, but Kevin's stories about himself are on an entirely different level. Most of them either involve the military, the war, or embassies. He has served faithfully for 3 out of the 8 years of war between Iran and Iraq. He defended his country and lived through it all. How he survived, though, remains a mystery to this day. Here are some of his spotlights. He once shot blank out of nowhere. It was in the middle of the night. When asked why he shot in the sandbags of the trench, he said he just wanted to know what would happen and did not mean to fill their shelter with dust. They almost beat him to death. He was chosen as a sentry one night, to guard all night long and stand watch. He slept after half an hour. When reproached, his excuse was that he was terribly sleepy. He was once stoned and wandered after the front line clumsily. He had later on asserted that he just wanted to go for a 15-minute walk. In the morning, several of the enemy's supplies and ammunitions were blown up, forcing them to retreat. Since even his parents had no idea where he had been during the time, they decided to gather a few friends of my grandfather and go look for him. After some digging, they found out where he just might be. Kevin was allegedly a war hero. My grandfather and one of his friends went on an adventure to find Kevin in the midst of raging flames of war. It took quite some time, but when found, he resisted to go back. Kevin contended that he was trying to fight for the country, and he'd even die if need be. When at last persuaded, Kevin reluctantly acquiesced and they all sojourned one night in a hotel almost 50 kilometers away from the battlefield. He was nowhere to be found in the morning. He had gone to a cinema. 1. He was taken back home safely and happily, before he ran again soon after. After 2 weeks he was brought back. Thankfully, this time, he had gone north, while Iraq was actually located in the southwest of Iran. 2. He used to love girls and flirting, as, almost, all young men do. Kevin, however, would go to such lengths to earn a woman's heart that it usually came at a price. He was particularly in love with embassies. I don't know whether all of them are true, but Kevin's conviction in telling the stories is unabated. He, to this day, keeps telling me how he always wanted to woo either a French woman, or a northern girl. Since there had been no embassies for the northern areas of the country, he, left with no choice, would call the French embassies. He had learned a few French words too, and a full sentence. He used to say hello, and, I want to marry a French woman please. Since his French was incomprehensible, he was usually asked whether he could speak his own native language, Persian. To his abysmal consternation, he was always rejected. When you speak fast, I cannot understand you. But when you speak slowly, I understand you. This is the only French phrase he remembers from those times. Kevin's completely oblivious to the meaning of we now, however. He usually just straight up goes to random tourists and says this, regardless of their nationality. He's proud to know this phrase. When out of despair his parents finally found him a bride, Kevin realized that he had lost interest and would not even look at the girl's face. He often mentions how she looked like Fiona from the Shrek series, and maybe they had modeled Fiona after her after all. Chubby nose, a skin color verging almost on green, there was no mistaking it. I should have never watched a cartoon with Kevin, not even as a kid.
He has always been convinced with infinite certitude that he is in fact an undiscovered genius, his reason being his knowledge of the existence of Harvard University, while many didn't possess such knowledge. He still, oftentimes, goes to random people and asks if they know about Harvard, or Oxford, or a clandestine, secret, underground organization called NASA, and so on. His list of esoteric discoveries goes on. He doesn't believe in the man's walking on the moon, however, he believes it to be a hoax. Footnotes 1. In the time of war, the government wasn't oblivious to the dangers of leaving the cinemas and theaters open, yet, they did it so that people wouldn't panic. Kevin, judiciously, used this fact to his advantage. 2. He allegedly used to have a keen interest in dirt and would consume it on a daily basis. In large quantities too. No wonder his parents were always worried.
Situational Kevin by Kruuth. Okay, to start, my dad is a brilliant reconstructive surgeon. He's fantastic at his job, but anything outside that with technology he's just a train wreck. Some highlights. Wanted a smartphone because all the other doctors had one. Got mad because the Android phone asked for his email and didn't have one. Thought it would cost money to get a Google Mail account. Bought a 5 CD changer back in the 1990s. Was claiming that it was broken. He was putting the CDs in shiny side up. Tried installing a radar detector in his glove box. Was scared of digital cameras because he doesn't get why they don't need film, despite me, my wife, sister, mother, and various friends demonstrating that it's on a memory chip. Now he just fills one up and buys another. Had to finally get a computer for his office. Didn't realize he could use it for things other than typing notes. After attending a week-long training course. Once texted me asking what time it was in my city. We are both in Eastern Time cities. Bought a 55-inch LCD HD TV and then was upset that the image from the video cassette looked like crap. Thought that Google Assistant was broken, but he just had the volume turned down. Now it's hard to say he's a Kevin all the time, because he mentors and trains other reconstructive surgeons, but get him near technology and he's a mess.
Kevin the Antisemitic Teenage Meteorologist by Kevinkevinsky. I'm a 16-year-old high school junior telling this tale to you. Amazingly, I am 3 years Kevin's junior, but nonetheless I tell this bizarre tale you feeling as if I were his teacher or father. The place, a university summer academic program about weather. Everyone stays for a week in a university dorm and goes to classes about weather for a few hours and talks about climate change. It's essentially a convention, and is very enjoyable for those of us who are passionate about climate science. Kevin was quite passionate. But was he talented? Oh hell no. What happened? On the evening everyone arrived at the university dorm where we would stay, Kevin showed up 2 hours late. The next morning, everyone was supposed to get up, eat breakfast, and walk to the classroom across the street. Kevin doesn't get up until 5 minutes to class, and we end up 30 minutes late because a teacher had to break in the door and drag him out of the shower. Kevin constantly asked ridiculous questions to guests. We had a few well-known storm chasers show up as guests and talk about how tornadoes work and stuff like that. Kevin asked one scientist from India if he could make him some curry. Kevin was in a program for high schoolers, but he was 19. He asked if he could teach the next year. He yelled at other students and asked the only girl in the class, if a lesbian and a gay man have sex, is it still gay? Someone was bullying another student, so Kevin called the bully a gay faggot. Kevin pretended to be a bullfighter and slammed another student to the ground on pavement after sneaking up on him from behind, nearly killing him. All during the walk back to the dorm after school. During the evening activities the university had scheduled for students, we went to a bowling alley. Kevin repeatedly threw bowling balls while the machine was taking in the pins, destroying the entire lane. He also went sliding down the slippery lane for fun. A state senator, yes, a literal elected official, visited us to talk about climate change. This was a huge honor for him to come to our program. He even brought a Tesla Roadster to show us. The state senator makes a joke, relevant to climate change. Kevin says, while we're telling jokes, here's a good one. My friends call me the perfect Jew because I can find money anywhere. Kevin finds out a kid is from a certain city and disparages his hometown as Meth City. There is one 76-year-old teacher teaching together with two students, college freshman and high school senior. They make Kevin eat lunch with the teachers because he can't be trusted. He proceeds to tell everybody he's a teacher.
Kevin from chemistry class by Ash_274. Preamble, sorry in advance that it's so long. Since I joined this sub there was a person in my history that I've considered a good candidate for Kevindom, but I still can't decide if he was a natural-born Kevin or his lifetime goal of consuming all the marijuana in Southern California influenced his Kevinosity to the point of belonging in another meme. I'll just post some of his best antics here and let you decide. Background: I knew of Kevin before 11th grade and he was in a few classes from middle school, but I was stuck as being his chemistry lab partner in 11th grade AP Chemistry. This was the highest of the 3 chem classes my school offered, but the regular chemistry and honors chemistry classes were full when Kevin was getting his classes and he couldn't take physics or bio as they were either full or there was already a history between Kevin and those teachers. He didn't belong there, but he had to go somewhere and I won the reverse lottery. Kevin's nickname was Pumpkin not only because his complexion was slightly orange, but because he was seemingly as wide as he was tall. Think of Cartman from South Park, but this was before South Park was anything other than the original Christmas video being passed around Hollywood on VHS tapes. He at least acted like he liked that moniker. Kevin missed about 25% of the classes, either by not showing up early enough, it was the first class of the day, which started fairly early, or ditching after arriving at school to go get high with his friends. Kevin discovers fire early in the course. We were given stations with an unlabeled chemical and various testing material to figure out what the chemical was, pH testing paper, some known chemicals to test for reactions, chromatograph materials, and a small alcohol burner and glassware to check boiling points. In some cases, the mystery chemical also burned. I asked the teacher if we could test for burning reactions, green flames, non-flammability, etc., and he unfortunately said that was okay, since the chemicals were safe. I said unfortunately because Kevin heard that as being okay to test anything with fire. Things were burned, pencils, paper, a pinch of hair, binders, and before Kevin could be stopped he knocked over an alcohol burner, spilling alcohol across a lab table and set it ablaze. For the record, that special coating they cover those tables with performed perfectly and the flames went out quickly with no damage. This was the 3rd day of chemistry and the first day of actually touching anything. Kevin was sent to the principal's office for the first of many, many times. It was also the last day students were allowed to burn anything. Kevin makes a bomb. This story happened 2 or 3 years earlier, in middle school biology, but it was the same teacher we would have in chemistry. We were doing some experiment with liver homogenate, basically, liver that's been through a blender, and hydrogen peroxide. You take a very small amount of the liver liquid, put it on a tiny piece of paper, drop a drop of H2O2 on it and observe the bubbles that quickly form. Hooray enzymes. Kevin likes reactions, so he took a dropper of homogenate and squirted it into a bottle of hydrogen peroxide and screwed the cap on tight. If you've seen those common brown bottles of peroxide, then imagine one that's so distended from internal pressure that the bottom is hemispherical and the top is growing white stress marks in the plastic. This happened towards the end of class and the teacher excused the class a minute early while he pondered how to move this thing without it exploding all over. He was able to do it somehow. No one ratted Kevin out for this, but after that no bulk material was ever out during class. All chemicals were pre-measured out in droppers before students arrived. Kevin the proto-Jesse Pinkman. Kevin learned from a friend, or dealer, that meth could be manufactured with chemicals, unlike pot or coke or whatever that takes time and effort. He looked through the chemistry book for a chapter or page that would be labeled meth. He never seemed to remember the full name, and was crushed when there wasn't one. He asked me how to make it, but I had no idea and wouldn't tell him if I did. At some point the class made the chemical that is used in urinal cakes. For whatever reason he thought it was meth, despite the name not containing the amphetamine at all. He ate some and he threw up. Kevin did not start a meth empire. Kevin earns road rash. Kevin and his stupid friends were driving around the neighborhood in a hatchback car, 50 plus in 25 miles per hour residential streets, and throwing stuff out the back of it, for fun. When the driver hit a speed bump too fast and unbelted, Kevin bonked his head and then rolled out of the back of the hatchback when the landing impact jarred the hatch open. He managed to hit the ground, roll, and come to a stop against a parked car with only some minor scrapes. His friends did what you'd expect, drove off and left him there. They told him afterwards what happened, since he never got his memory of that event back. They still were friends after that, and Kevin thought it was funny. Kevin the ball and chain. Midway through the quarter they jumble the lab partners so that everyone is with someone else, to prevent one team from really being one good student and carrying the other. When the new list was posted, everyone had a new partner, except for me and Kevin. I contained my rage until after class and asked the teacher why I was getting consecutive sentences for a crime I never committed. He said he wasn't worried about my grades, but I was probably the only person in the class that would be able to keep Kevin from doing some real harm to others or the classroom while still being able to do my own work. It was hinted that while I would probably get an A on the final exam, that it would be all but guaranteed if I stayed as his lab partner. Kevin skipped class most of that week and probably didn't notice that everyone else had switched partners. Kevin poisons his brother. This was 20 years ago or so I forget exactly why we had phenolphthalein in class, but I think it changed color in the presence of something and stayed clear when not in the presence of something. The chemistry book we used described each material and their structures and reactions and uses. Unfortunately, the book mentioned that phenolphthalein is used in laxatives, usually the harsh kind, but in small amounts. Kevin decides to pocket one of the plastic droppers of the stuff and bring it home on Friday and give it to his brother as a prank. He doses his brother's Gatorade bottle and nearly sends him to the emergency room. In his words, his brother shat an entire hallway and he was being literal. Kevin's brother finds out at the end of the year. We're all passing around our yearbooks and I was ready for a little revenge for dealing with Kevin. I wrote, amongst all the other little messages so it wouldn't stand out, "I hope your brother doesn't find out about the laxative you gave him. Have a good summer." The following year I didn't have any classes with him, but I saw him on campus and asked him about his yearbook. He said, "Yeah, my brother saw that and beat the crap out of me. Still worth it." He wasn't mad, so it all worked out. Kevin laughs and the whole world stares like WTF? They're slightly buzzed, under the influence, high, really high, high AF, and high as Kevin. We were all used to Kevin being on one of those tiers from day to day, but one morning Kevin was well off the end of the scale. I'm not sure if he was seeing snakes and spiders, but he was not his normal goofy and looked really intense and wasn't blinking. I turned to him in the middle of a lecture and with a serious face, held up my pencil and said, "Kevin. Green. Pencil." First he looked at me like I had just given him the formula that would save the universe from imminent doom, but then he let out a little stifled snort, then started to laugh, then louder, then it was full-blown out of control laughter like the Joker used some poison gas on him. He fell off his chair and was literally rolling back and forth on the ground and crying and struggling to breathe from laughing so hard. I look up at the teacher and class and they are just staring at the scene, frozen with bewilderment. I give them the "I have no idea what happened" shoulder shrug. The teacher had to call his name out 4 or 5 times before Kevin could pick himself up to crawl outside the door, where he continued to laugh for another 5 to 10 minutes straight.
Let me tell you about my classmate Kevin. By Emil_Scalabia. Now to understand why I would post stories about this guy on here, I must first explain the school system in Switzerland. After 9th grade, you have 2 options to either start an apprenticeship or you apply to one of the high schools. Now in order to get accepted into these high schools, you usually have to pass several rather difficult exams in the subjects of German, mathematics, and French. There are multiple high school types. The one Kevin and I go to is the so-called canton-wide school. Now you might have guessed it already, Kevin is dumb as fuck, and somehow managed to pass these exams. What he then did was sign up for the English class, and I did too. Now that means that most of our lessons, excluding German and French, are in English. It's clearly meant for people who want to improve their already good English and become fluent. Kevin does no fuck all about English, or any language, for that matter. If my calculations are right, Kevin has now had English for 8 years, and he lacks the ability to properly conjugate. Not only while freely talking, no, he can't even do it in writing. Keep in mind, conjugating in English is far easier than in German. He pronounces every second word wrong. Latest in mind I have was this afternoon, when he pronounced Virginia like vagina. He can't finish his sentences properly and usually just starts mumbling halfway through so we can't hear him stop mid-sentence. His vocabulary is very narrow, and when he doesn't know a word in English, he often just pronounces the German word for it with an American accent. It's not that extreme in German or French, but it's still painful to listen to him, since he basically possesses the speaking ability of a toddler, and his pronunciation is similar. Keep in mind, Kevin is Swiss German, so German is his native tongue, and he can't even speak it properly. I also want to stress here that Kevin has no mental disabilities whatsoever. Now that's not where it stops, oh no. Kevin regularly explains things to our PE teacher that he has just learned in school. One time he told him how sound behaves in a vacuum, or more specifically, how it doesn't at all. When our physics teacher introduced us to Newton's laws, he blew up a balloon, let it go, which of course resulted in the balloon flying around the room, and then asked us if it would work in space too. Somebody in our class tried to explain why it would work, and Kevin interrupted him with a loud, "But it don't go, of course, there is no air in the space. Are you stupid?" This morning, Kevin had a presentation about a character from the book we're currently reading in English class. The task was to analyze the character while using quotes from the book to support your arguments, basic stuff. Kevin said a quote, then said "well that mean of course" and then repeated the quote. He did this 3 or 4 times, sometimes even 3 or 4 times with the same quote. When we had a philosophical discussion about the ethics of cloning and using those clones in order to harvest their organs, also based on the book we're reading, he kept insisting that it was okay because they were only clones. I explained to him the basic concept of clones, told him that they were still human, all that shit. He agreed with every single sentence I said. I then concluded with, "So it wouldn't be ethically correct to harvest the organs of clones, who are still people, right?" And he replied with, "But they're just clones, I don't get it. Do you know that scene from SpongeBob SquarePants with Patrick's wallet? Yeah, that's how it felt." Kevin is a referee for Saga. That makes him special, at least in his eyes. It also means that he is overly aggressive in PE when somebody in his team makes even the slightest mistake, and he usually throws a hissy fit. This applies for Eversport BTW, not just for Saga. Kevin has a girlfriend. They really love each other, it's cute as fuck, really, but even she knows he's fucking stupid, and she doesn't hide the fact that she also has no clue how he got to this school. Kevin always smiles like the sun from the Teletubbies. Always. Kevin manages to include himself in every story, or turn the conversation back to him. And if he doesn't know how, he will just mention that one time when one of our classmates pooped into his bathtub. That guy is a story for himself, though. But honestly, there is one redeeming factor for Kevin. He can do a backflip. And he regularly does one, in class, to show off. And he will repeat it, if nobody appreciates it enough. Edit, I'm just remembering more stuff, I'll add what I can think of. During a physics exam, he asked the teacher what vertically meant. He knew it was some kind of direction. Our physics teacher said, "Well, there is horizontally and vertically. Horizontally is like the Horizon." Kevin was now even more confused, had to ask in German. Fun fact, the German words for horizontally and vertically are literally the same as in English, both from Latin, which confused Kevin even more.
Kevin asks homeless man what did he think of The Last of Us 2 by striking. Debate 2. Kevin and I were walking around in my local city. We met up because we hadn't seen each other since the COVID-19 lockdown started. We got some food at McDonald's and were talking about games and shit. Kevin began a seemingly endless rant about The Last of Us 2. Now, I am not much of a gamer myself and I really had no interest in the subject, so I didn't really pay attention. Kevin just kept going on and on and on about that bloody game. Until a man said in a drowsy tone as if he was about to fall asleep mid-sentence, "Here, lad, I don't what you're on about, but could you spare some change?" He then held out his arm, walked an unstable wobble closer to us. Now, let me get one thing straight before we continue. I don't have anything against homeless, nor do I like to push stereotypes and judgments about them. That being said, this person was very obviously a homeless person based on how he appeared and the fact that he was asking for spare change. Kevin piped up, oblivious to the man's question, and responded in a deappant tone, "I am talking about that fucking SJW rubbish, The Last of Us 2, have you played?" The man, clearly drifting in and out of consciousness and left out, affirmative murmur. Kevin, again oblivious to the man's state of mind, asks him, "What did you think of it?" At this point the man fell asleep. Before the both of us left, I awoke the man up, told him where the soup kitchen, told where he can get emergency accommodation, and left. I yelled at Kevin for being such an oblivious moron once we were heading home. After I yelled at him, I headed home.
One of Kevin's mini arrests by quickdrawyall. Growing up, my brother's friend gave our family a term for acting like Kevin well before I'd found the Reddit stories. One that always stood out was Kevin's drunk driving incident. After Kevin crashed into someone and left the scene of the accident, with a massively damaged car, he made his way directly home and parked it in the parking lot. Too drunk to figure out which of his keys would open the door, he decided to punch his glass window and crawl through into his living room. Needing to wind down from his crazy night, he decided to light up a bowl on the couch. Thinking someone was breaking and entering, his neighbor called the police, who were now knocking at his door. High and drunk, he decided to open the door and greet them, where he was promptly arrested for so many things.
It took me 45 minutes over the phone to teach Kevin how to register by adriator. Something that has to be noted before you start reading: we were talking over the phone. No screen sharing, no screenshots, just our voices. You could say I have evolved a third eye for Kevin's idiocy after all this time. Let's start. Kevin: hey, you wanna play a video game on our computers? Me: oh, yeah, sure, which one? Kevin: IDK, find a multiplayer one. Me: how about a Yu-Gi-Oh trading card game online? Was it Dueling Nexus? Kevin: sure, I loved Yu-Gi-Oh as a kid. Me: okay Kevin, you've got to go to this link I've just sent you on Facebook and register there. Kevin: I don't see anything. Me: what do you mean? Perhaps the page didn't load yet. Try refreshing it. Kevin: I did. Nothing's happening. Me: Kevin, do you see anything? Perhaps a Yu-Gi-Oh logo or STH? Kevin: yeah, there's a Yu-Gi-Oh logo, but no register button. Me: Kevin, there's a huge green register button on the upper right side of your computer screen. Kevin: computer screen? Me: yes, Kevin, it's not going to be in your wardrobe mirror. Now, what do you see on your computer screen? Kevin: it's black. Me: what do you mean it's black? Did your computer turn off or something? Kevin: what do you mean computer? I'm on my phone. Me: Kevin, you told me at the beginning if I wanted to play on a computer. Kevin: ooh, yeah, right. So I have to play this on a computer? Me: yes, Kevin. You have to play this computer game on a computer. Turn on the computer. Not necessarily true, but I doubt this has a mobile browser version for a tiny 6-inch screen. / 10 minutes later / Kevin: okay, I've turned on the computer. What now? Me: what do you mean what now? Go to the website and register. Kevin: how do I do that? Me: FFS Kevin, just press the link I've sent to you on Facebook. Kevin: done. What now? Me: do you see a register button? Kevin: yes. Me: press it. What do you see now? Kevin: it's asking for my email and password. Me: well, type your email in there, chop chop. Kevin: what's my email again? Me: Kevin how could I know your email? Kevin: well, I most certainly don't know it. Me: wait a moment. I go and create an email for Kevin real quick / Me: okay Kevin, type in Kevinkevinsky@gmail.com, mail to Kevinkevinsky@gmail.com, in there. Kevin: how do I type the monkey? Me: there. The what? Kevin: you know, the monkey. Me: oh, right, on our keyboard layout it's right Alt+V. Kevin: it's not working. / I see a vision of Kevin pressing the left Alt button / Me: Kevin, the right Alt button. Kevin: I told you it's not working. Me: Kevin, you're pressing the left Alt button. Kevin: oh, right. Kevin: well, what should I put for my password? Me: just put anything in there, like Kevinkevinsky 2001. Kevin: why not Kevinkevinsky 1999? / now, I completely lost my temper here. The reason why Kevin wants to put 1999? because he likes older girls, and wants others to think he's older. Even his Instagram account is Kevinke1999 / me. Are you fucking kidding me? Just type it, you moron. It's not like anyone else is gonna see your password. And that, me lads, is how I taught Kevin how to register in almost 45 minutes. Bonus story. / 3 days later / Kevin, hey, adriator, what's my Yu-Gi-Oh password? Me, how the heck should I know? I told you to write it down. Kevin, well I didn't. Me, why not? Kevin, I didn't need it. Me, obviously you do now. Have a nice day. Click / Index of my stories about Kevin.
I knew a Kevin once by Fiern. This guy I went to high school was a Kevin. He constantly got in trouble in middle school because he wouldn't shower or use deodorant because he didn't think he needed it. In high school he failed at least 5 classes and missed the graduation ceremony because he had to retake a class during the summer. After high school he tried to get into the Marines but couldn't because he couldn't keep track of and organize his own medical documents. He failed to keep a job more than 3 months and went through at least 20 of them while I knew him because he would just sometimes refuse to show up depending on how he felt. He drove so poorly and with such disregard that he rear-ended my car at least 5 times, all of these times being when it was parked in his driveway because he wouldn't look behind him while reversing. He once almost sent us into a ditch while trying to drift too. Money-wise he couldn't keep a dollar to his name. Every time a paycheck came in, it went into 3 things. Food at his favorite restaurant, the most expensive sushi restaurant we lived by which he ate at almost bi-weekly, new gaming technology despite having no computer or game system to play games on, and gas. The last one isn't that bad except for his inability to drive and his speed demon nature. He was always trying to hit 200 miles per hour on long highway stretches. There's also the fact that he wound up losing pretty much every friend he had because one of his favorite things to do was call people the most provocative thing he could think of in public spaces. He started calling me a pedophile anytime we were out in public. He legitimately thought it was a harmless joke and even an endearing nickname. Needless to say, I don't talk to or associate with him anymore. Edit, specifying speed. Also, new gaming technology means he was buying super expensive mice, keyboards, and microphones like he was about to become a Let's Player or streamer despite having no usable computer. He also would buy a new $100 pair of headphones at least once a month. I know this, because he always offered me the old pairs.
Kevin at high school by Marekin. I had a friend at high school who we'll just call Kevin, and he always acted very strangely. / Kevin once though Godzilla was real because he had just seen a Godzilla movie, and he thought Godzilla was going to attack the school, so he ran around screaming at people to get to shelter all day long. / One time, during a game of Capture the Flag, the team Kevin was on lost the game, so he raged, and screamed so loud he could be heard from the other side of the sports oval, and then he tripped over himself. When the teachers walked over to him he yelled at them, saying that his brain was burning. / Kevin once randomly came up to me and demanded that I do a drinking competition with him, by which he meant we would both drink at the bubblers non-stop until one gives up. Before we even started, he said he couldn't drink any more than he already had. / Kevin once said that all anime is amazing. / Kevin played Dungeons & Dragons with our group for about a week, and he played a character who was half dragon, and named Bob. Whenever any other player told him to do anything, he would grab their character sheet and eat it. He ended up quitting because there were too many players and not enough dragons.
A Kevin in Public Accounting by YtseJams. Hello all. Today, I bring you stories about Kevin. Kevin was an audit associate at a mid-sized public accounting firm, and lasted way longer than anyone thought he would. His Kevin-ness was mainly exemplified through a complete lack of social awareness, particularly on how much alcohol is appropriate, but it doesn't stop there. Sit back and enjoy. Apologies for any formatting errors, I'm unmobile. Keep in mind that public accounting, particularly audit, is an industry that is really dependent on your image. The industry is about trust and professionalism. So, Kevin spent over $1,000 on alcohol at our new hire orientation week. He bragged about this fact. Kevin was staff on an audit of a residential facility for disabled adults. The first day on this job, he went into the facility's cafeteria to get breakfast, and was politely informed that it was for residents only. Kevin's response was, "Oh no, it's fine, I'll pay for it." He took his plate to the end of the line, realized that there was no place to pay, shrugged, and ate his breakfast. He repeated this 4 more times. Kevin was informed that one of his jobs was a business formal client, coat and tie. He wore an American flag tie every day, and did not button his top button. Not a huge deal, but I would kindly remind him every morning that he needed to button his shirt up all the way, and his response was the same: "Oops, I forgot." Kevin stayed in a bed and breakfast for a week on one of our smaller jobs. This bed and breakfast had a small, shared fridge. Kevin bought a 12-pack of beer and stuck it in the fridge on Monday, taking up a huge portion of the fridge. At least it was gone by Wednesday. During one of our regular training camps, he and a friend would go up to their hotel room between sessions and do shots. Kevin consistently invited his co-workers at orientation and training to go to strip clubs, and seemed confused when we declined. Kevin consistently recommended Hooters as a good place to eat while at training or on jobs. Kevin once went to lunch with a client's CFO/controller, along with his supervisor and the rest of the audit team. For lunch, Kevin ordered a $25 meat platter, including ribs and hot wings. He licked his fingers several times. Kevin would often ask co-workers that he ate lunch or dinner with if they were going to eat something on their plate, often before they were finished. Other times, he would just snatch a piece off their plate. I had to tell him that it wasn't okay to have beers at lunch while at a client's, well on the client's bill. Kevin thought he was a real suave guy. Whenever our main contact was a middle-aged woman, he would try to put on the old Kevin charm. I guess he didn't notice the faint looks of disgust, or realize that he was never put on the same job twice. Timing is pretty important in our work. If you see something weird, you're supposed to communicate it really quickly so we can get it figured out on site. While doing testing at a separate location, Kevin noticed a few odd things. He waited until he was completely finished, drove back to where we were, and then told his supervisor, "Oh, yeah, there were like 12 mistakes in the 30 things I picked out." Supervisor drives over to get some clarification. No errors. Kevin just misread or misunderstood. 12 times. Kevin was the only person in any training event I've ever been to at this company that was late to anything. He was 2 hours late due to a hangover. Kevin's views on women. Oh boy. He didn't quite understand the awkward silence that followed when he said something along the lines of "guys are just smarter at math." He didn't quite get that phrases like "bitches are crazy" aren't acceptable anywhere, much less an extremely white-collar, professional job. I could go on. That's all I can remember off the top of my head. I'm pretty glad has gone.
A Kevin story of my own by mouse_e. Before we start with my short story of my Kevin experience, I would like to point out a few things. 1. The Kevin is a girl, so I'm going to call her Kevinette. 2. The Kevinette in this story is actually a nice person, just really dumb. On to the story. In Humanities in School 1, Mild Winter Day, my teacher was talking about people losing jobs due to machines and the oil patch grenading. We're from Alberta. We're talking like full-on families of 3 to 5 losing their main source of income. Our teacher's going on about them having to find new jobs when Kevinette blurts out, "Why don't they just go work for McDonald's?" Now, Kevinette has grown up her whole life rich, without having to worry about money or anything, so she would have no clue that making $15 an hour barely even supports college kids. We all laugh about it now, except for Kevinette, 'cause she still has no clue that you can't make a living for a family of 5 from working at McDonald's.